Welcome back to the UNF Leadership Podcast. After a short hiatus, we're excited to bring you a summer's worth of conversations with some of our favorite leaders in the world of leadership. On today's episode, author and sports psychologist Joshua Medcalf. After playing college soccer at Vanderbilt and Duke University, Medcalf embarked on a fascinating journey, ranging from serving as the sports psychologist for national champion UCLA women's basketball to living and working in a homeless shelter. It's a journey he details in our conversation and which led to the near dozen books he has now authored. Many in Jacksonville know who Joshua is without knowing him. In addition to being a friend of Jon Gordon, last week's guest on this podcast, Joshua's book, Chop Wood, Carry Water, is regarded as an essential read by many in the worlds of sports and business. Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Parker Washington popularized the phrase and book after meeting Joshua at a golf event in Arizona in 2023. It's how I first came to know of Joshua and why I sought out connecting with him. This is Voices of Leadership, Joshua Medcalf.
The first thing I wrote down, Josh, now that I just babbled for 5 minutes, is who are you, Joshua Medcalf?
In what context?
Whichever
I
context.
I also wear a lot of hats.
Then go for it. I just babbled for 5 minutes, so you can do the same.
I'll give you a short little bio. So my father grew up in a trailer park, dirt poor, and he had worked really hard to become an eye surgeon, but he was very young when he had me. So I was born in Tulsa, but then was in Chicago, Detroit, and Akron until I was 9, bouncing around while he was trying to get into the ophthalmology program. And then when I was 9, we moved back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we were kind of living the American dream. And we had the house with the pool. We could see his office from the backyard. And then the American dream kind of turned into the American nightmare. My baby brother, who was my best friend, I didn't find out until I was like 32 or 33 that I was on the spectrum. And so that really colored a lot of my social experiences as a kid. And then bouncing around so many schools that didn't have a lot of stability in terms of social networks. And so my baby brother, who was 6-7 years younger than me, was my best friend. And he was freakishly athletic, and tragedy struck when he we think that somehow he'd gotten a toy in the pool or something happened like that. He climbed over a fence, probably hit his head because he could swim. He was 2.5, but he was so athletic that we taught him how to swim. And but something happened, and my mom screamed, and I just heard this guttural scream, and I knew he was in the pool. And so I sprinted and dove in head first, was the one that pulled him out of the pool, went through, that crazy situation. They were able to revive him slightly, but he lived for 30 more days and then passed away. And so a lot of my life has been colored by that experience. Then, I played sports my whole life. I lost 2 coaches to prison by the time I was 16. And then I ended up getting a soccer scholarship to play at Vanderbilt, a very small one. We only had 2.1 scholarships as a program. And again, socially, it was just tough. Then now academically, it's tough. I had a 21 on my ACT, but now I'm at a school like Vanderbilt. And so I'm academically in over my head. I'm socially in over my head, but I was just really good at soccer. But so I ended up getting, I say kicked off the team 5 times in 2.5 years. That's exaggerating a little bit. I was suspended from the team 5 times in 2.5 years, just with lots of different, situations. Then they end up cutting the soccer program after my junior year at Christmas. And so I just hung up my cleats and I was focused on my education. It was really important to my dad that I had gone to a school like Vanderbilt. My dad and I had a terrible relationship, but the one thing he was like really proud of is the fact that, he'd grown up in a trailer park and his firstborn son was attending Vanderbilt. And so I just focused on school. And then I went out for the club soccer team like 9 months after, and they end up cutting me. And so then, and mind you, I was like one of the best players on the varsity team. So then I get a call from Joe Germanese, who had gone to Duke immediately after the program got cut. And he was like, hey, are you interested in playing at Duke? And I was like, Joe, are they interested in me? I got kicked off the team 5 times in 2.5 years. I had mediocre statistics, and the club team just cut me. And he's like, yeah, I vouched for you, and we have a scholarship available. So somehow, by the grace of God, I end up getting a full ride scholarship to play on the #1 team in the country. But then when I got to Duke, things were really, really tough, because now I'm playing with and against the best players in the country. And when we'd play pickup games, I was the last pick every time. And so my teammates, it's easy when you can get mad at your coaches and be like, why don't they play me? But when your teammates say you are the worst out of 27 people on this team, you don't really have anyone to blame. And I was taking a sports psychology class with Greg Dale, and he asked everyone one day how much of sports we thought were mental. And, you have these really smart kids, Duke, top 3 pinnacle of academic and athletic excellence. And they're going around the room, and most of the kids in the class were student athletes. And they were saying 70, 80, 90%. One girl was like, Greg, I think sports are 100% mental. And I was like, you guys are insane. Because if this is true, then why has nobody taught us how to train mentally? We have spent our entire lives on physical training, on technical training. You can't just say, this is where the autistic side of my brain clicks in. You can't just say something is over 70% mental and have spent 0 time training it. And so I was very frustrated. I was looking at Greg Dale, God bless his soul, and I was like, you're not an athlete either, by the way. Like, I know what an athlete looks like, and you're not one of us. Like, when I walk in the room, people know that I'm an athlete. Like, we're easily recognized. You carry yourself differently. There's a different swag. There's a different, the way you move, the way you dress. It doesn't always work that way. But for the most part, when an athlete walks in the room, and especially in college, you're like, yeah, that's an athlete. And he wasn't that. And so it was very hard for me to trust him. But that's why I say it worked out really well for me, because if I wasn't at rock bottom athletically, I wouldn't have listened. But because I was like, well, might as well attempt to do what this, little non-athlete is talking about. And it helped that he worked with people like Peyton Manning and Ichiro, and banking leaders from around the world would fly in to work with them. But still, that didn't, our best player was Mike Grella. And Mike Grella thought that he was crazy. He didn't listen to him at all. And so I attempted to do what he talked about. And in a 2-month period, I went from being the last pick on the team to finishing second in points to the best player in the country, who was Mike Grella. And was the ACC Player of the Week, Duke Student Athlete of the Week. And I had this transformational experience that I couldn't deny. I'd never scored a goal with my head. I'm 6'3", and I scored 2 goals with my head after learning how to use visualization. And this is just trying, didn't really even know what I was doing. It was like, I'm going to try and do this crazy thing that he talks about called visualization. So I couldn't deny what had happened. And then I got even more upset, because I was like, why did I have to get to Duke to learn this? And so I made it my personal mission that I was going to get it out to the masses. And I skipped scholarships to law school, and I moved across the country into a homeless shelter. I lived and served in a homeless shelter for 7 or 8 months. And then from there, I moved into the closet of a gym. I had a guy ask me today, you said you lived in the closet of a gym, but what do you... And I'm like, yeah, it was a closet. We rolled out trash cans and they cleaned it up, but it was a closet. And I lived in the closet as an apartment. We put a bed in there, obviously, and a fridge, but there's it's not meant for people to live in it. There's no windows. It's, it's not a tiny closet, but it's a closet of a gym. And so I lived there for 9 months. I started going into the Watts housing projects and training the athletes in Imperial Courts. And then really when my life changed, there were 2 things that happened. One, I met Anson Dorrance on an elevator and pitched him without even trying to. It just came out of like, who works with your girls on sports psychology? And he's like, I do, I can read and write. And I'm like, well, do you know who Barbara Fredrickson is? And he's like, no, why should I? And I'm like, well, our research on positivity shows your positivity ratio is around 1-to-1. That forecasts clinical depression. If it gets above 2-to-1, that forecasts languishing. If it gets above 3-to-1, that forecasts flourishing. Doesn't matter if it's individually or collectively for teams. And she teaches at this little school. What's it called? Yours. And he was like, okay, you have my attention. And we became friends after that. He invited me out to be the second person ever in like 35 years to work with his program on mental training. I didn't know that at the time. When I told him that I was the second, he didn't even remember that he had had another person. That's how long it had been. And so that started to kind of change my life. But really what happened was when Corey Close called at UCLA. And Jon Gordon had just died. Gordon had mentored her for 15, 20 years. And so she was, my words, not hers, but I think she was feeling a little bit lost, having lost her mentor from a coaching perspective. And I kind of fit a weird, I'd worked in the housing projects, so I had that background. We believed a lot of the same things at a foundational level. She believed in mental training. She is a genius when it comes to finding young talent and creating culture in terms of like, there's so many different things like myself of people that she's brought in early that like are now on ESPN or do that. Like, she identifies young talent early really, really well. And when she gave me the position of director of mental training, that changed my life, because then I didn't have a sports psychology degree, but I had a title that I was the director of mental training for UCLA women's basketball. And I was responsible for coaching somebody that was coached by Jon Gordon. And I basically stepped into Gordon's shoes in many ways. And so that was when things really started to change. And then fast forward to now, IMG had asked me to head up mental conditioning and leadership 11 years ago. And so I knew that that told me that I was one of the top 5 people in the space in the world. But there was no go-to book in sports psychology. So I was really nervous that if they hired me, they would own my work product. And so I went home. I didn't leave bed for almost 60 days. And when I say that, I mean, like I would leave bed for like 20 minutes a day, maybe shower, get a little bit of food, but I was just head down. I write all my books on my phone and I was just writing. So I wrote 2 books. The first one was actually called Start Here, Mental Training Finally Made Simple, which had a 45-page fable of chop wood, carry water inside of it. Oh, okay. And then Jon Gordon read the draft and said, throw the rest of that out, expand the fable. The fable's the book. And I, naive, arrogant, young, was like, I write real books. I don't write fables. And
like you, Jon Gordon, who's a friend of us, by the way, at TLI, because of course he lives here.
Yes. And so we thought about it for a couple of weeks, and then finally I relented and I went all in on that. But simultaneously, I wrote my memoir, Hustle. So I wrote 2 books because I was just trying to get as much content published as possible if I were to end up taking the job. I didn't end up taking the job. And then really when my life changed was with Chopwood, because Chopwood became the go-to book in sports psychology very quickly. And, and it's funny, like I said, I live in a bubble, but I don't hear about these things often. So Jaylen Brown's team reached out to me last year. And they were like, oh yeah, you're Jaylen's favorite author. Chop Wood, Carry Water is his favorite book. And so we had a meeting this summer and I was like, so when did you read Chop Wood? He's like, oh, my freshman year at Cal. And I was like, that's like 8-9 years ago. He's like, yeah, it was the foundation of my success. But I'd never heard about that for 8 years. And so it's weird because that book has so much cultural influence and impact. I was at a wealth management thing for golf because most of my free time is spent playing golf. And so at the end, I go up to the guy who heads up wealth management. I won't say which firm it was for North America. And I hand him the book and he's like, oh, I love this book. And he goes off for like 5 minutes about it. Like, Lou Holtz gave me this book and I've given this book out to 100 people. And And he just keeps talking about it. And finally I go, that's awesome. I just wanted you to have a signed copy though. And he goes, how did you get a signed copy? And I was like, yeah, that's what I thought was happening. I was like, I wrote this book. And he goes, oh my gosh. And so that's kind of how my life, that's like a snippet into my life though, that people like have read that book and maybe it changed their life. Maybe it's one of their favorite books, but they don't ever reach out to me. So I never hear about it. I hear about like 0.001% of the time, kind of like the Parker Washington thing. Like if you hadn't reached out to me, I would have had no idea that was going on.
Which that in of itself is something that I think I may be, actually, I'm pretty sure. And our media market is small, to be fair, in Jacksonville. I think I'm the only one who's asked him, like, when did you read the book? And he tells me this whole story of how he met you. No one knew that Josh Dobbs is his cousin, which I was like, that's on us. Like we probably should have done a little bit of research there. But again, I think a lot of this speaks to the idea of connectivity. So let's go back to the Anson Dorrance meeting in the elevator and this idea of pounding the stone. Like I said, for me, pounding the stone is connectivity, networking, meeting new people for the sake of happiness is only real when shared with others. But for you, how much has that gotten you to where you are now?
So I would encourage you, if you are open to it, to eliminate the word networking from your vocabulary. Yes. I believe in just building relationships and adding value. And it's fascinating. So much of the stuff I really try and work on with people is linguistics and linguistic intentionality, and that don't say positive if you mean encourage and things like that. Like just being really, really like, what does that mean? If a coach tells their team to be positive, it's like, what like say what you mean. Like actually like flesh out. We have a really cool language, like use it, find the words that you really mean to express what you're trying to express, and don't make it kind of these superlatives of like, oh, well, just do this very generic thing. And so even to the point, there's a guy that I did an NBA pre-draft talk one time to a group of about 25 guys, and one of the NBA skill trainers he'd printed out this book for them where he defined like 500 terms, and they were very basic terms. And I was so impressed by that. And he was like, dude, most of these kids, they don't actually know what these words mean. They get yelled at them, and they've been yelled these words and phrases by coaches some of their life, but most of them were just really talented and were able to get by without knowing these things. So I want everybody to be on the same page of what the linguistics mean. So yeah, that's just a little tidbit.
No, I agree with it. That's part of, so another book I read last year besides yours was Go Giver, if you've read that one. And that was another one that cried on an airplane reading it. Just because this idea of, I was given to me by a friend after everything went down. I was about to start at ESPN that Monday. And this idea of, you've been doing this, and that's why you have a job. You're going to have the full-time job, and you have spent 10 plus years building for this part-time job that's actually the career job. And that was just by purely building relationships without worrying about the transactional quality of them.
Exactly. Because be careful with Pound the Stone. I think I already told you that, but if you cried during Chop Wood, you'll really cry during Pound the Stone, because that one and Finish Empty, both they're very real. And with all the stuff that I've been through in my life, my issue with Chop Wood, Carry Water, I'm very grateful for it, but that it gets taken by a lot of transactional people, and they use it to beat kids and people over the head with it. And so in the future of leadership, we talk about that if you just try and use strategies and you don't actually have an authentic heart posture shift, that it'll fall flat, because people, they may not know why, but they'll be like, yeah, something just doesn't feel right about what you're doing. It feel, like when you get that, like, I just feel like they're sleazy, or I feel like they have ulterior motives. And so I work really hard with people on, like, if you don't have an authentic heart posture shift, you can employ the same strategies, but they're not going to work the same way, because people can feel, whether they can articulate it or not, they can feel when it's authentic and when it's a strategy. And so it doesn't mean that networking doesn't work. It doesn't mean that it's not powerful. It's just that when you, and especially like one weird nuance to that is the more successful you become, and I use success loosely, right? Of like monetarily or, the way most of the world defines success. As you move up in rank, if you will, the more that you can be genuine and actually care about people, it is like 10 to 100-fold the impact, because that's when it becomes even more rare. And one of my favorite things about Anson was that, like, this flipped something on my head when I was young, was when I emailed him, he got back to me within an hour. And for the most part, and which is weird, I hope somebody gets this to him, because I've been trying to reach him. And since he retired, I don't have, like, he used to respond to every email I sent him within like 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And now I haven't been able to get a hold of him the last few months. And
he's off the grid.
Right. I'm like, I need his cell phone. Somebody needs to tell him that Joshua Medcalf wants to talk to him, and he'll get back to me. But the thing that was so special and what shifted my perspective was that I thought that people that were important, right, and that had a lot going on, like, they wouldn't get back. They would. So I was always hesitant on getting back to people quickly, because I thought that would make me look like I didn't have a lot going on. And when Anson responded so quickly, I realized what it did for me and how it made me feel. And I went, that's what I want to try and do as much as possible. So I now have two phones. I have one phone that I carry with me, and I have the phone that's in the back of all the books. And that's only because I'm so good or bad at responding that I will respond quickly. And the autistic side of my brain, like, if you say something crazy, I will respond back, probably with a little bit of a mirror that is also crazy. And I realized I should probably have some space from that phone so that I don't respond, because I need to be very intentional in how I respond to people. But when you can respond quickly to people, again, as things elevate for you, the way, like, what it does for other people, and responding to everything, they're always like, I'm sure this isn't actually Joshua Medcalf. And I'm like, no, it's me. But to me, I've just seen what that did for me when people did those things. And so much of what I've tried to do, the podcast I was telling you about that I'm starting with Tanya Parr, she's like, what should we call this? Because we just talk 2 or 3 times a day. And like I was saying, it's just like, let's try and let people peer in and hear some of these conversations that we have, because I think they would really impact a lot of people's lives. But I said, I think we should just call it what we wish we learned in school, because everything I've tried to create, every tool that I've tried to equip coaches with, leaders with, teachers with, people with, is, what do I wish I had learned? What do I wish was taught in school and that's not being taught? And just really funneled through that lens. And so I was like, let's just call it what we wish we learned in school. And we'll get interesting people with interesting stories. And most of them are connected to me in one way or another, but I've never really wanted to have my own podcast. But I was like, if it'll get Tanya Parr to do this, then let's do it. But yeah, it just goes back to that. What do I wish that I had? And I feel like maybe it's some character flaw that I have, but so many times when I go through life, like Maggie and I went into a store the other day to get a belt, and the way that this woman, I'm pretty sure her name is Pamela, the way that she treated us in that store, I was like, she's one of the best in the world that I've ever seen. And it's over a belt. Like, it's a nice belt, it's from a nice store, but like, we go in nice stores all the time. And a lot of time they treat you really poorly. And I just am always confused by it. I'm like, that people are here to spend money, and like, I like, why do you do this? Like, it doesn't make sense to me. And so it always goes back to that, like, what do I wish would have happened? Like, what do you not know about this? Because if you knew what I know, if you were equipped the way I've been equipped, I think you would handle this radically differently, and your life would literally transform for most people. And so many of those encounters, I just try and like be the thing, create the thing. And look, I'm like, I always say that if you catch me in a professional setting, you'll probably love me. If you catch me in a real world setting, who knows? I amplify people's energy and put a mirror back up to them, and I don't even mean to. But like so much of what I've tried to create and equip people with is and are the tools and the things that it's like, hey, have you thought about it this way? Hey, have you like read this? I think this could really, really change a lot of your interactions. And so going all the way back to the networking thing, like I can feel when people just want to network, but when somebody is just genuine and wants to build a relationship, and like I'll give you credit with this of like you just want to have conversations with people. You don't even have to hit record, like
Nope.
and that type of relationship. Like there's somebody that I again, I don't want to use certain names, but person that's become very famous lately because he went through a lot of a crazy situation. And when I found out that my books had been really impactful to him, I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I want to come and spend time with you. And he's like, okay. And he turns out to be way more autistic than I am. And so I didn't know that at the time. I didn't find that out until I got there. And his wife and daughter were like, do you know how autistic he is? And I was like, we're just meeting. This is interesting, but he's awesome. And so like, but he kept kind of being like, so what are we going to do when you're here? I'm like, well, we don't need to do anything. I just am going to spend time with you. Like I'm doing what I wish if the roles were reversed that somebody would do. And that's so like, just by just doing that, so often I've seen, from an impact perspective, what that ends up doing for people. It is so wild. And to me, it's just like, well, this is just what I would have wanted to be done for me. Like it's very simple. But it's sad to me because so rarely does it happen. Like there's this proverb that my mom had me do very weird things when I was a kid. So like I was in preaching competitions when I was 6 years old, literal like judged preaching competitions.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm a state champion speech and debater, so don't worry. There's no judgment in this call.
I can tell that you have that background. You're amazing at speech and debate.
I appreciate it.
And so I was doing all these like weird things as a kid, but like it's fascinating to me when I would read Proverbs, because it was like, it's 31 Proverbs and to read one every day based off the month. And when you would read, like, do you see any truly competent workers? They will serve kings rather than mere men. And when you read that, it's like, that's the standard, like truly competent. It seems like a really low bar. But the truth is, it is so rare to find people that are truly competent. It is way more rare to find people that are truly competent, that pursue excellence, and that actually care about people as people. And if you can kind of hit that trifecta, you will go so far and above and beyond what you probably ever dreamed or imagined. Like some of the opportunities that I have in my life, I'm blown away by them. And it literally most of the time comes back to those three things of I just try and do that. And I fail. And again, there's tons of people. You can go to my golf club and lots of people will tell you that I am the biggest blankety blank that they've ever met. And they really hate me and they don't understand why anyone would listen to me and blah, blah, blah. Sure. There's definitely a demographic of people that feel that way. But what I'm so grateful for is that the people that I've attracted in my life, the Dave Hilfmans, the Tanya Parrs, the Anson Dorrances, the Sue Ingquists, the Corey Closes, the Doris Burks, the Candace Parkers, like these people that not by trying to do anything, just by doing those three things, that people are like, whoa, like Candace was calling a game at UCLA, and I just said a quote to her, and she literally, her head snapped, and she's like, "What did you just say?" And I repeated it. I was like, yeah, like C.S. Lewis said, when you put first things first, secondary things aren't suppressed, they increase. And I believe in putting first things first. And it's not that the secondary things don't matter. It's just that I don't focus on those things, because if I put these first things first, that the secondary things take care of themselves. And like, that's what built a relationship with Candace. Like, and to me, I just go like, those are just such basic things, but using chalkboard as the example of the 9 Michigan hospitals and washing their hands, like it's everybody knew that you should by the 20th century, everyone knew that you should wash your hands before going into the OR. But did that mean people did it every time? Did that mean people, were super methodical about it? No. And then when they actually implemented that and made sure that they did it every single time, we saved $15 million. We save 1,500 lives. We decrease the infection rate by, some massive percentage. But again, it's just doing those basic things really well every single time. And then the impact and outcomes tend to take care of themselves.
So one of our big mantras in the Taylor Leadership Institute is this idea of everyone is a leader. But in the last few years, I know myself, as well as Dr. Olson, have come to kind of change that a little bit of everyone is a leader, but first we must lead ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's where Chop Wood, Carry Water really comes into play. And I know as we look at your books, that's kind of the foundational first one, you would argue, right? That's kind of the one that sets the table for all of the others, this idea of trying to get to that competence level. If you can and do those 3 things you alluded to, if you can just keep it simple,
right,
and do those things well, then everything else will fall into place from there. And I think with being a leader, I think a lot of that stems from that same idea of if you yourself are doing those things, you don't have to worry about projecting some sort of message. You yourself become the message.
So one of my favorite leadership stories, I was out working with a program, and I had explained that I don't believe you should use fitness as a punishment, because using fitness as a punishment makes 0 sense if you really think about it. Like, we all know that fitness is the one thing that can close a gap between a good team and a bad team faster than anything. And you want people to do it on their own. You want them to do it in the off season. You want them to take it very seriously. So why would you psychologically condition something that's so valuable to be a punishment and a negative thing? And so I'd explain that. Next day, we're at practice, and coach storms over to me, and he's like, all right, so what am I supposed to do? They showed up with their shirts untucked, but, normally I'd have them do down and backs, but you say that, I can't use fitness as a punishment. So what am I supposed to do? And I was like, I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful, but look at you and every one of the coaches on your staff, and every single one of them had their shirt untucked. And they go, listen, I could care less about having their shirt tucked in. That is an insane thing to me. But if you care about that, maybe you guys should take a look in the mirror and tuck your shirt in. And, I think the message was received. But it's, I talk so often to leaders about, take a look in the mirror first. Whatever you're upset about, whatever you're frustrated about, how are you modeling it? How are you creating it based off of what you're doing? And, it's very easy to look outside and go, man, they should. Da, 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 da. I had a terrible experience a couple months ago flying or trying to get onto a flight. And what I told my client afterwards was, I said, the thing that frustrated me the most was I had been traveling lots. I'd gotten home at 9 p.m. the night before, and I needed to be at the airport at 5:30. And, not a big deal, but I was assuming I had a first class ticket and I wasn't checking bags. And so typically my experience is very show up, oh, I don't have a boarding pass. I need a boarding pass. Go, like, can you print my boarding pass? And the way they looked at me, and it was just taken, and I was like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, well, they actually, they like bumped you. They gave your seat away. And I was like, I paid for a first class ticket. What do you mean they gave it? Well, you didn't check in. And I'm like, well, it's 30 minutes before my flight, and I'm standing here asking for my boarding pass. But the reason why I was most frustrated is because it spun quickly, and I went into, my dad grew up in a trailer park. I am going to do one of two things in intense situations. I'm either going to be really calm and probably more like a lover, or I'm going to be your worst enemy and I'm going to be a fighter. And most people that know me well would say he's probably going to lean towards fighting more than he is to loving if you mess up or you go at him. And I was so frustrated internally, because I was like, if I had put myself in a better heart posture, mindset, place before I'm so good at flipping those situations, but because I was kind of running on fumes and hadn't prepared properly for the day, I got caught on my back foot. And as soon as I was on my back foot, I reverted to childhood of all right, you want to fight? Cool, let's fight. And so it's, it's that look in the mirror of if I had the energy to shift my internal energy first, I probably could have got them to fix it. But because my energy wasn't
defensive,
right, I went to fight. And by that point, then I'm if I swing, it's well, I'm not going to not swing, and I'm not going to apologize for swinging. So then I'm in a position where I'm all right, well, this next week of trips just got a lot tougher, because now I'm not going to get on a flight until 3 p.m. and I'm going to have to do that. But it's usually that, okay, if I take the hard look in the mirror, they should have handled it differently. It's Delta. It's, you have a first class ticket. You sort it out. You bumped me and I paid for a ticket. You figure it out. But if I had shown up differently, then I probably could have greatly influenced that more in my favor. And so it's take that hard look in the mirror and where's your shirt untucked?
When did heart posture enter the lexicon and enter your stratosphere as a term and as something that you've taught?
Have you heard it anywhere else?
No.
Yeah. So when I was living in LA, I've gone to this church, a guy named David Roos, who wrote a lot of songs. He was a songwriter, but also happened to be the pastor of that church. He talked about it. And as soon as he said it, it resonated in my soul in a way that I was like, that's it. That's the thing that nobody's teaching, nobody's talking about. So many people are talking about strategies, and no one is really talking about heart posture. And heart posture is what you can't fake, and people can feel it. And it's one of those, there's a lot of different language around it when it comes to energy and things like that, and stuff that I don't disagree with at all. But I think the most succinct way of being able to articulate it is whether you can consciously feel it, and you most likely never will feel it consciously. At a subconscious level, you can feel people's heart posture. And it is the greatest determining factor. One of my other favorite things that I think I came up with, I'm not sure, but I've also never heard it described this way, is that we create, attract, and repel the world that we experience based off of the deepest beliefs of our heart. So it's not just that you manifest, it's manifestation, but the way most people talk about manifestation is different. So I just came up with that way of articulating it of we create, attract, and repel the world we experience based off the deepest beliefs of our heart. And you can try and manipulate like the way, oh, you should think differently. Oh, you should act differently. But most of the time, it's like, what do we deeply believe in our heart about people? What do we believe about women? What do we believe about men? What do we believe about teachers? What do we believe about politicians? What do we believe about our boss? What do we believe about one time a person said to me, oh, I'm not first class people. And I said, why would you ever say that? And she just never thought about how, I don't care if you fly first class, but to say that phrase, that is, I do, again, a lot of what I believe comes from what I studied as a kid, and from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. To say something like that, when I talk about self-talk, and I play a lot of competitive golf, I'm like, you might hear me blow up on the golf course. It's rare, but you might hear that. The one thing you will never hear me do, ever, is come at myself about something when it comes to my self-talk. I'll externalize it, but I won't ever say, you idiot, you stupid, why you're so... Never, ever. One of the biggest things that Greg Dale taught me was to become my own best friend and my own best coach. Okay. And so, and I actually think that it's somewhat healthy to, in When in the Dark, Lucas had talked about venting the volcano and allowing some of that stuff to come out. And I've even cautioned parents and teachers with kids. It's very rarely the kid that's like myself that might be more expressive about their frustrations that you have to really worry about. The one you have to worry about is the one that never expresses it, because that means that they're probably acting in.
Right. Well, like Travis in Pound the Stone.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's that if you don't ever have a way to vent that volcano, and you don't ever externalize what's going on, then the likelihood of internal sabotage, self-harm, it increases significantly.
Mm-hmm. I love the line about be your own best friend, because I think that goes back to that idea of everyone's a leader, sure, but you've got to lead yourself to actually become a great leader. And so you have to have that positive self-talk. And with us working with college students, and many of whom are listening to this right now, I think that is becoming a little bit more commonplace to discuss, at least in the sports realm, because I know for me, I graduated college 10 years ago and was in high school before then. And I don't know if it was actively talked about circa 2008 to 2011.
No, it was very new. And so again, the upgrade that I've tried to help in the sports psychology world, they like to say positive self-talk. So I don't have an issue per se with positive self-talk. I just think that there's something way more real and beneficial. And I say that it's beneficial and constructive self-talk. So the way that and again, this is from my natural wiring. So my natural wiring is not to be a quote unquote positive person. And so positive people, always, I was very leery of them. Like, oh, you're not realistic.
Which I should note too, Jon Gordon also doesn't identify as a naturally positive, naturally extroverted person either.
He does not. And he and I also have intense debates over this exact subject that I'm about to share.
Love it.
So the most simple way of articulating this is if you were attached to another person in a potato sack, and like a potato sack race, but you're on a highway and you have semi trucks coming at you 90 miles an hour. Do you want to be in a potato sack with another person that is a positive thinker or a beneficial and constructive thinker?
The beneficial constructive thinker, because you got to problem solve. And that's something that when you go through Navy SEALs, Delta Force, my fiance is really into that sort of mindset training. And this is what he used to be a federal agent, so he's very into that sort of thing. But we just were watching one last night, and they said that the biggest trait that they look for when they're recruiting for those two groups is problem solving.
A positive person, like, they get beneficial and constructive more naturally. They get the positive thing more naturally. The problem that you run into is people that aren't wired that way, because, and this is what I realize, like, most of the content I've created and value that I've created has come from being in the trenches with people. I didn't go get a PhD. I didn't go get a master's. I say that I had to have a PhD in results, because if it didn't work, then I wouldn't get hired, and I don't have anything to fall back on. And a person that's positive, you say, oh, be more positive. They go, yeah, you're right. Yep, I need to be more positive. You say that to somebody that is not a positive person, they're going to want to or will punch you in the throat. So that means that it has shortcomings. I have not yet met somebody that if you ask them, is that the most beneficial and constructive thing that you can do or say, it eliminates anything else. It is not positive or negative. It is, what is the most beneficial and constructive thing? And so I just think that there's a higher level of consciousness and mode of operating, which is beneficial and constructive self-talk, because it doesn't alienate anyone, and no one can really fight it. I have not yet found someone that can really fight me on something better than. And if there is something better than beneficial and constructive, great. I'm open to something deeper. But I think that positive self-talk is only going to land for a certain demographic. And you can say, oh, it's not going to hurt that bad if the truck hits us. But you want to be in the potato sack with somebody that says, we got to move left now. We got to move right now. We got, like, in that it's beneficial and constructive, that's
Right.
attached to reality. It's not positive Pollyanna. Well, it won't hurt too bad. We'll be okay. Like, you can ground it in what is the most beneficial and constructive thing to do, say, etc.
So real quick before I get to the last topic I've got written down, can you teach someone to have constructive, beneficial talk to themselves? Or is that something you're born with? It's part of your heart posture?
Oh, it's 100% teachable. And most of the time people self-talk, there's no such thing, I would argue, and I could be wrong, but that you're not born with self-talk. Your self-talk actually is a talk track that comes from what your parents said to you as a kid, and especially in highly emotional moments, and from what important leaders said to you and how they coached you. That's really what it comes down to. So much so, the example I would give is, I've been on the golf course many times with people that when they start berating themselves, I stop them, and one thing I'll say is, don't talk to my friend like that. And they're like, what? I was talking to myself. And I said, don't talk to my friend like that. And the other thing that I will ask them is, whose voice is that? Because usually it is the voice of a father or mother that spoke to them a certain way. And it's not even their voice. They don't hear their voice. They hear their father or their mother saying, you're an idiot. You're never going to be anything. You're a blankety blank. It's not even their voice. And so your self-talk track is usually a authority, influential figure from your life that beat things into your head and conditioned you in a certain way. And so, yes, it is 100% reconditionable, but that takes time, energy, intentionality to rewire those beliefs in your heart. One technique and tool that I try and give people is that, I spent probably 5 years listening to things at a very low level that are almost imperceptible to hear while I was sleeping. Because when you're sleeping, your brain is still processing it. Your subconscious is still processing it. And that's actually one of the easiest ways to slip things past your amygdala is while you're sleeping and you're just hearing it over and over and over again. And that's kind of what happened as a kid, is those things, just without you realizing it, were playing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if you can go in and record yourself, listen to others. I really like when people do it themselves and then put a music background that they like, that's very soft and soothing. And literally it is almost imperceptible, but our brains are processing 11 million bits of information per second. We're only conscious of 40 of those bits. So our subconscious is still processing all of these things. And the more that we can just have that running in the background is actually trying to clean out inside of our heart and shift our heart posture, the deepest beliefs of our heart. And that's one of the ways that you can kind of upgrade, if you will. And, like we all do that. Like, when's the last time you bought and upgraded your cell phone?
Last June.
Exactly. And you've probably had about 5 to 10 in the last 10, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do that all the time with that type of software and hardware. But most people are still using the same software that they were programmed with from the time that they were 3 years old till 10. And they've never upgraded their software. And that would be insane if you were walking around, not necessarily insane. There's some people and there's some value to it if you're walking around with a Nokia phone. But there's going to be a lot of limitations to a Nokia phone. And so it's learning how to, the Navy SEALs kind of, a lot of them consider chop wood, carry water to be their Bible. And, one of them that I worked with, I had to stop him many times and be like, stop trying to tell me what you think about this. You have a Nokia software operating system. I am trying to give you a Apple 12.0 software. I don't need you to understand it. I need you to hear what I'm saying and repeat what I'm saying over and over again until you understand it, because your software is broken, old, outdated, and I'm trying to upgrade your software to benefit your life in the ways that it's only benefiting your life in these really teeny tiny areas, but your software is actually hurting your life in all these other areas because it hasn't been upgraded since you were a little kid and all these emotional things happened with you and your father, and this has gotten you to a certain point. It's allowed you to excel in certain areas, but if you don't fix this, you are going to absolutely implode because you are trying to operate with a software that was given to you under these very emotionally duress moments in your life.
That aren't your heart posture either, by the way. That's somebody else's that's dictating it to you.
Yes.
Because at that point you were so young, which is a fantastic segue to chop wood, carry water, and the idea of daily disciplines. And so that is something that we've talked about a lot through the Daily Coach, and then bringing some of that curriculum to UNF. This idea of chop wood. At the surface level, for those who haven't read the book, that's, I think, what they take away from it. This idea of every day before the day could start, had to chop wood and carry water as part of the samurai at school. And so to that end, I ask you, yes, this constructive self-talk can be one of your daily disciplines, but what else are some daily disciplines that you've seen in your life that have transformed your software?
Yeah. So, personally, they're completely infused in all of the books that I've written. And I try and be very transparent about all of those things that have been really helpful for me. When I work with clients, the thing that I try and do is, one, I really try and be very careful and intentional about not pushing what I want for them or what I believe on them. So I don't deal with right and wrong. I say, what is most beneficial and constructive, but I try and ask them, what are your priorities? And then when they tell me what their priorities are, then I say, okay, well, now let's look at where does your time go? And does that match to your priorities?
The audit of time.
Yeah. Or do you say that these things are important because that sounds good and you think those are the right answers? But then when you show me what you actually do with your time, so how do we deal with that? And then we come over and it's, okay, so who are the people that you really admire? What do you think on your deathbed is going to be allow someone to live a truly successful life? What does a truly successful life look like? Who are the people that you admire? What does a truly successful life look like? Okay, now let's try and pull back and figure out what are the characteristics of a truly successful life. Okay, which of those, let's put down 3 that you believe are going to lead to a truly successful life on your deathbed. Because like what we talk about in Finish Empty is that while life is about others, it also is a single player game, and the controller is in our hand. And the number one regret of the dying is I wish I had had the courage to live a life true to myself and not one that was trying to live up to the expectations of others. And while that makes sense theoretically to most people, that is not at all how they live their life. So, looking at my fingernails, like I have my fingernails painted, and that drives a lot of people crazy in a lot of the circles that I walk in. I'm like, why does he have his fingernails painted? Like one of the things at the golf club, the way they've nicknamed me is Nails. But part of that is that when I was in Japan a few years ago, I saw a lot of young kids that were painting their nails. And I saw, oh, well, this has kind of been hijacked in Western culture that this means that. And I have influence over, in particular, 2 of my best friends, young boys. And I used to paint my nails when I was a little kid. And I remember when I was on the free throw line in 7th grade at Grace Fellowship Christian School, and I was shooting a free throw, and I looked down at my hands and I saw that my fingernails were painted, and I felt shame and self-conscious. And I never did it again. And so when I put all of that together, I went, oh shit, this is pure to who I was as a kid before I was messed with by social, cultural norms. And I have a responsibility to model for the young boys in my life what living an authentic life looks like. And so, so much so, this was such an issue, not issue, but like the first thing I coach a very high profile CEO, and I received a very kind and gracious letter from a high ranking person in the Senate and inviting me to come and have lunch with a bunch of senators. And the first question that the CEO asked me is, are you going to change your nails before you go? And I said, I've thought a lot about it, and I know that it will be a lightning point, but no, I'm not going to. And because like it goes back to that, like on my deathbed, I want to know that I've lived a life true to myself. And more importantly than that, for the young kids and the young boys that I have influence over, I want them to see this, and they're young. They look at it and they go, whoa. Why do you paint your nails? Boys don't do that. Like, you're not like what girls paint their nails. Well, let's have a conversation about that. And I want to model for them what it looks like to live a life true to yourself, regardless of the social norms and expectations. And that's easy in theory. You go to some of the golf clubs that I go to in the Senate dining hall, if you get invited by Republicans, that is it's very, very hard to walk that out. But those are the types of things that, like, that's the type of stuff that people can say whatever they want about me, and they're believe both sides, right? Like the people that think I'm great, yeah, believe them. They probably have had those experiences. The people that I'm shit, you should probably be careful with them, but they probably got what they got. But for young people, I want them to see me model these types of things.
Tuck your shirt in. It's the same thing as the tucking your shirt in. It's ironically, because I think the Republican senators would tell you to tuck your shirt in. But ironically enough, this is your version of, okay, well, is yours tucked in?
I'm gonna model what is, what is pure from, like, there's a big difference between being childlike and being childish. And when I was a child, this was something that I like to do. I'm an artist. I didn't realize that until I was much older. But like, my frustration in so many areas of the education system is I see the world differently. I'm an artist. I can put my artistic spin on things, and that I have this brilliant artistic mind, but I couldn't draw. So growing up in the Midwest, well, you can't draw, you're not an artist. But this is something that was like very pure. And so now as an adult, when it's uncomfortable, as a 40, I turn 41 tomorrow, as a 41-year-old, thank you, male, like, that lives in California, there's a lot of things when people see this that they assume it means something else. But to me, I want to do my best to live out what was childlike in me and pure, and model for young people that, what do you love and what do you care about? It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about that. Like, who cares? You're going to get made fun of. People are going to, but just protect that. And you're probably going to find, I was winning preaching competitions when I was 6 years old, just like you did amazing at speech and debate. Like, it
was actually, you'll love, it was the state championship speech or piece, I guess, was Lisa Kudrow's commencement address at Vassar in declamation.
Yes, exactly. Like, there's certain things that you're more wired from childhood. Like, one of my best friends, his nephew is 6 years old. I think maybe now he's 7. And this kid is wired to be a deal guy. Like, he just is constantly negotiating and goes into the card store with us and he's negotiating deals with his friend. And you're like, yeah, man, this kid's going to be in, M&A and finance and do deal. Like, that's just what, like, he is hardwired for this. And if he does something else, that's going to be very strange, because he is built for this. I've been talking my way in and out and convincing people of different things since I was 7, 8, 9 years old. The reason why I wanted to go to law school is because I had people that were 50 years old when I was 10 that was like, I want you to represent me one day. You are going to be an amazing trial lawyer. And I'm grateful that I moved into a different space where I get to change the way people think the same way that trial lawyers do, but in a space that's maybe more beneficial and constructive outside of the 1 or 2 people that they're representing. But, just going back to that, purity of childlike heart and what you care about and are passionate about as a kid. And, a lot of people think, you grow out of like your love of sports and balls, and that I was a kid that was like ball, I want to play. No, I'm 41 and I still, like, if I do physical therapy 3 times a week to be able to play competitive golf. Like, it's true to the core of who I am, and I want to keep focusing on and pursuing those things and shedding as much as possible. Like, a lot of what I try and do with clients, especially ones that have reached these quote unquote really high pinnacles of success, is like, let's shed the layers of things that you've added on, that you're only doing these things because you think it's what successful people do. You don't even like going to that restaurant. You don't even like those clothes. You don't even like these things. It's just you believe that it projects a certain version of status to others, and it's not actually true. Like, what do you love and what do you hate? Like,
right. And that's how your daily disciplines come from that. So like for me, last year I committed to, okay, my 3 daily disciplines are going to be, and part of this I think is also routine. And so I said, okay, I need to exercise in the morning. The day doesn't start till I exercise in the morning. I have to journal, and I got this nice little full focus planner, and it's become my little life guide over the last year plus.
Yep.
And so I have to journal, otherwise the day's not done. And I also have to read. And to your point, reading was something that as a child was very critical and very much at the core of who I was. And it's something that I've gotten out of in recent years. And naturally, it's just become part of the routine. And so that's where, for me, like we try to teach in the program this idea of those daily disciplines that keep you grounded, just because I think there's value in that. But I agree. I don't think it's something that you can go to a CEO and say, well, you need to journal, read, and exercise. And that's how you know the day is done. And it's not fair for me to say to students watching this that that's how you determine success. It has to be based off you and who your authentic self truly is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just going back to, like trying to customize, like it bothers some people, like in my coaching, but I always try and be very careful. And I say no to like 99.9% of people that ask for it. I'm like, you like my books, you're not going to like to be coached by me. Chris Cuomo calls me a combination of Rain Man and Bobby Knight. And I take that as a compliment, but a lot of people wouldn't. The Navy SEAL said, beware, like don't get confused by the paint on his nails. Coaching with him is tougher than nails. And but it's really trying to figure out like what is who they are and what's important for them. And so I might have two different clients that I tell to do two different things because they care about two different things and they're wired completely differently. Dave Hilfman is wired completely differently than almost anybody else that I've ever met. You two have lost the love of your life when you're 36, 37 years old and go through that. And he made a promise to Tracy when he saw how bad she wanted to live that I will never have a bad day, ever. And I've never seen him have one. And I've pressed him. And in tournaments, I can get very upset. And I have pushed him and he never breaks. And so when I realized, this isn't just positivity, he made a commitment and discipline that I am going to have a great day every day and every spin I get around this planet, because I made a commitment to Tracy that I would live every day for her and I would never have a bad day because I saw how bad she wanted to live. And, so something I might try and help him with, which I help him with very little, but would be very different than somebody who's, wired completely different than he is. So it's looking at, I would say it's like a tailored suit. Like it's what do you need, not what does somebody else. And that's going to be different for every unique individual, because while we have more that makes us in common than separates us, everybody is still unique. And there are people who are wired very differently at their core than others. And trying to have this one size fits all approach is very naive, because humans are still very unique individuals.
This is the last one, I promise. And it's from Chop Wood, Carry Water. And I thought that this was a good way to kind of sum things up. And we have a special guest appearance, folks, if you're watching this. Come on now. I thought for our students, I thought this was a good way to end, Joshua, which thank you again for your time, is this idea of the shit ladder. For those who haven't read Chop Wood, Carry Water yet, can you explain what that is and a parting message to the students listening to this as they try to lead themselves and find their way in this world?
Yeah. So it's basically that, being very careful about what building you have your ladder on, and that you don't have to look that far. And one of my favorite things, I don't like reading a lot of the books that are in my industry. I like reading a lot of autobiographies and biographies of people that I call the greats, just in the sense of, I admire them and I respect, some aspect of their life. Obviously, you're going to only see a portion of it, but that you start to see the same patterns over and over and over again. And you want to be very careful about just following what society or what your teachers or what your coaches tell you that you should do and what's most important. And you really want to make sure that you have your ladder on a building that is sustainable and that is a ladder in a building that are going to matter on your deathbed, because you can do everything. You can win gold medals. You can get to the top of the ladder and then go, oh shit, my ladder was on the wrong building. And it usually happens way too late. And, you climb and you climb and you climb and you climb and you do all the things that you're supposed to do. And, it's a little bit like, there's a quote in one of the books, I can't remember, but, it's like thirsty people guzzling salt water, that it's only going to dehydrate you more. And the fallacy that we believe in is, that true satisfaction and fulfillment are going to be somewhere higher up on the rung of the ladder of achievement or quote unquote success. And since it's the message for college kids, I say, Naira Fields is like my little sister at UCLA, and she's an amazing kid. It's really cool. She's now kind of doing a lot of the stuff that I do, but she was one of the first kids at UCLA that I really mentored, and she was like my little sister, and she was freakishly talented and freakishly athletic, but she was not equipped the way that I would have liked myself to be equipped, or that I was equipped, or that you would dream of somebody being equipped as they're growing up. And so she had kind of bought into a lot of what society tells you to buy into, and she happened to play for Team Canada. Well, Team Canada happens to lose to Team USA a lot in competition. And so freshman year, sophomore year, multiple times a year, she'd come back and she'd be so upset and so frustrated because they got bronze or silver and they lost to the US. And I would always just make that noise and just be like, Nye, listen, winning gold is not going to do anything. I know you think that it's going to change things, but it's not going to change anything. And I get that it sucks to lose. And I've not met anyone in my whole life that's more competitive than I am. I understand, and I hate losing so much it's not even funny. But winning can't do for you what you think it's going to do. And sure enough, her junior year, summer, she wins gold. And I couldn't wait for her to get in the gym. And she walked in, and my smile was bigger than it's ever been. And I was like, so? And she was like, you were right. And I'm like, yeah, it just can't. Like, you think that it's going to do something for you. You think that job, that raise, that place, that thing that we put on these pedestals, that it's going to do it. And this is why it's so important that we focus on the only two things that are important in any day is the impact I have on other people and who I become in the process. And if I focus on achievement, if I focus on some arbitrary outcome-based goal, that's not it. It can't give for me what I actually want and need. There might be momentary, and there usually will be momentary bouts of happiness and joy, but it can't give you true satisfaction and fulfillment. And so again, in the Future of Leadership, we talk about this, and we really got it from the business secrets of the Trappist monks, and how the monks, they talk about the difference between transformation of circumstance and the transformation of being. And what people really want is transformation of being. And they fall for the fallacy that the transformation of circumstances, if I could just achieve this, then I'll have this transformation of being. But that's not how it works. And oftentimes it actually the hole gets bigger, because if I could just win a national championship. Well, then you win one, and now I have to go win another one to prove that one wasn't a fluke. And then now I won two. Well, when is it? It can't do it. So yeah, that's the oh shit ladder.
Felt like that's a good way to end, especially because so many of our students are talking about process over assignment these days. And I am encouraged, and I'm sure you are as well, as somebody who, again, not your traditional quote unquote sports psychologist, but someone who operates in that same ideal of, hey, we need to talk about these things, whether we're an athlete, someone in business, a student. because that's the only way that, to your point, Joshua, we're going to give impact to others, create impact for others, and better ourselves, is by having these sort of conversations. So,
well, thank you so much for having me, Mia. Truly a pleasure and an honor to get to spend the time with you. And I look forward to the next time that we get to do it.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to the UNF Leadership Podcast. For more episodes like this, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. This has been a presentation of the Taylor Leadership Institute at the University of North Florida. Swoop!